Hi, I'm Nick Dawson, the editor-in-chief of Talkhouse Film, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Film podcast. Michael Tully persevered for 20 years to make his passion project Ping Pong Summer, an 80s set movie about Rad Miracle, a hip-hop mad teenager who comes of age during a family vacation to Ocean City, Maryland. When Ping Pong Summer came out a few months back, Savage Steve Holland, the writer-director of the 80s classics Better Off Dead and One Crazy Summer, wasn't available to write about Tully's movie, so it seemed only fitting that I should persevere until the timing was right. When Holland finally did have an opportunity to check out the film, he immediately emailed me to say that Ping Pong Summer was the best movie he'd seen in 10 years. So I thought I'd put him and Tully together for a chat on Skype and a little bit of mutual appreciation.
Hey, Mike, so it was funny because Nick sent me this movie a while back, and I've been doing a bunch of stuff, but then it's so interesting because normally I get boned on these things. So people send me the weirdest stuff because there's this weird assumption that the more disgusting and vile it is, it's the more like Savage Steve Holland style. And I just have to say, I was so enthralled with your movie, and I thought it was the most delightful movie I've seen in the longest time. So I was so happy that Nick came through, and it was just great, and you did such a great job.
Well, thank you. I think that's the risk. The risk with this movie is that it's no danger and no edge whatsoever. Where it's can you make an interesting 90-minute movie where everyone says, screenwriting 101 is there has to be high stakes. And in our movie, every step of the way, before the big battle, when you're supposed to be raising the bar, life or death, the dad's we'll love you no matter what. And you're
I know. It was so cool. It was funny. I got talking to John Heder from Napoleon Dynamite a couple weeks ago about something. And I said to him, Napoleon Dynamite's the best 80s movie that's not made in the 80s. And I think you're up there with that right now.
Oh, man, that's incredible.
I've read all your interviews and stuff, and you said, wouldn't it be cool in 3 years, everybody thinks this movie was made in the 80s? I think that could happen, It's just really great. And what I loved about it was I kept expecting the cynicism that I always seem to get in any movie that's especially made about teens or preteens. Mm-hmm. And every step of the way, I expected something bad to happen, Every character that showed up, I love the guy who gets out of the pool and just has this big stupid smile on his face. I thought sure he was gonna smack. My first instinct was he's gonna smack the icy out of the kid's hand, And then that didn't happen. The skateboard guy, I thought he was gonna come and punch the kid. And then Teddy Fry comes by, and I thought he was gonna scam the kid. And just every step, I was waiting for that, cynical thing to happen. And it was he didn't do it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think your work also, whether it's from the very beginning, the features, there is a sweetness to it. So I think maybe, like you said, when people send you stuff, they're not really understanding that the sort of sweetness, it's even Better Off Dead, the character is trying to kill himself, but even at the low points, it still has a sort of optimism and sweetness to it. And that I think is sort of maybe the spiritual guide that I was hoping to capture. And just in the sense of ultimately, I've been trying to get this movie off the ground for 20 years, and it had shaped and shifted, and there were R-rated versions, but I've lived long enough. Go ahead.
Do you mind if I've been dying to ask you about that. In some of your interviews, you didn't really go into too much depth about the process of how you got your movie made, especially a sweet movie, like you just said, you had an R-rated version and Better Off Dead. I had to drop the F-bomb twice in it because they were trying to get a PG-13, and then it just didn't work. It was like Roy Stalin saying F you to Cusack, and it was just that just made him such a jerk, Yeah. So I took it out and went for the PG because it just ruined the movie, I thought. But that's interesting that you had more of an R rating or version of it. How do you mind telling us what that was, or what you thought, or how you got away with not doing it, or what the decision process was on that?
Well, it just was the kind of thing of I went to film school in Baltimore, and every year, and I graduated in 97, I guess it was. So I was I went to school to make this movie, and every winter I would rewrite it. And it just sort of became a Rorschach of the cinema I was into at the time. The core was always the same. It was always the title, Ping Pong Summer, and it was what if I inserted combined hip hop and ping pong into an 80s movie, a beach movie. So that never changed. But for a while, Rad it wasn't a family vacation. That was something that I lived long enough with it where I thought, I want to make kind of a love letter to the movies I watched at that age when I wasn't watching Bellatar, Satan Tango, and I wasn't a real cinephile. So I was just trying to like do a love letter to my own family upbringing, which was sweet. It was like my parents are still together. They got along really well. And, you know, aside from the usual squabbles like in the movie, but I lived long enough with it where I thought it would actually be sweeter to make a movie that was PG, and we had that same discussion in 2013 about do we put an F-bomb in there, and it just didn't feel right.
Right. That's so cool, man. Well, congratulations on that. But it's just interesting that you can get away with like not making a completely cynical, edgy teen movie, and it's just what makes it's going to make it live forever, you know. And I was really impressed by that.
And I'm wondering, in the sense, is it true that are you gearing up to do a feature this summer?
Oh,
That's true or no?
Well, it's one of those things where it's what do you call it, cast dependent. So that's why we're talking to certain people about it, and we'll see what happens. But nothing's real until you're on the set and it's actually happening. That's why I was wondering, like for instance, when I was trying to get Better Off Dead made, I went to Cal Arts out here, and I went out for like a couple of years trying to sell it, and everybody thought I was stupid, which is, it is. And then but I did the same kind of thing with like a kind of a mishmash of like, things that really happened and exaggerated it. And but there was just one day when I had one meeting with one guy, and I said, this is the absolute last. The guy's voice, his name's Michael Jaffe, and he's a real tough guy voice. And I thought, this is the last meeting I'm going to take on Better Off Dead, and I'm just going to abandon it if this doesn't work, because I'm so tired of like trying to sell it or pitch this idea. And that meeting has really just changed everything. He was having me rewrite a teen movie for this company he was working on. And it was just really crappy teen movie. And I said, you got my name and you liked me because of this Better Off Dead script that I wrote. Why don't you make Better Off Dead? And then he said, well, hold on, I'll go home and think about that. And like called me the next day and said, yeah, no, you're right. Let's make Better Off Dead. And that was like, that's how your life can change in one night, And I was just wondering, and by the way, I'd gone through a million companies where people had developed it or, hung on to it or attached themselves to it or something. And then there was always like the rewrites I had to do where I had to put like boobs in it or whatever. Yeah. And I was just wondering, how did you finally get like someone to cough up the bucks?
It was really the main producer. We had a lot of producers, of course, because you need that anymore to get a movie made. But George Rush, who he had sold my last movie at Sundance called Septien. When I met him at Sundance, I hadn't met George, and we met in the flesh and had a beer. And he was like, well, do you have any other movies? Just doing the small talk thing. And at that point, I said, yeah, there's this 80s ping pong hip hop comedy coming of age that I've been, it's like the bane of my existence. I've been trying to make it for 20 years. And he was like, that actually sounds like a good idea. He's like, your baby, your life dream project is an 80s hip hop comedy. Like, so he was the one who, after 20 years, a lot of people have liked the idea, have had meetings, had some flirtations with Hollywood, but it was really the core of George saying, I want to step into producing, and I think I can raise the money to get this movie made. And that was really the true beginning. Like you said, I was about to give up. I was hitting the 20-year mark, and I was going to say, if I can't make this movie after 20 years, it's over. I'm just going to put it to bed. And that's right when the world sort of smiled upon us. But everyone, to the extent, I don't know if you've heard, it's pretty crazy that Ocean City, Maryland, where the movie ends up kind of being a love letter to, they invested, their tourism boards each invested $100,000 in our somewhat strange independent movie.
I didn't know. That's amazing. That's so cool, because actually it was like I was going to ask you about that too. Is that the actual town that like you went to with your family?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those locations were written. That's why George is from San Francisco, and he's like, "Why does this movie have to be made in Ocean City, Maryland? What is Ocean City, Maryland?" And I was like, "Just come out here." And he made a trek, and he made a visit, and was like, "Oh, okay, now I get it." Like that dolly of the minute-long dolly of that buffet.
I love that. Absolutely.
I went to that buffet in 1985 with my parents. It's the same buffet.
It is so awesome. It's funny because like the reason why I made One Crazy Summer is because it's Nantucket, because I wanted to just go to Nantucket, but we really go to Hyannis, which is in Cape Cod, and my grandma lived there, and it's the same thing where like I love the opening with the little guy with the rad looking over like just at the signs for a really long time of all the crab shacks and all that stuff, and just reminded me so much of my summers in Cape Cod where everything was magical. You know, when you drive up and you just come into your like sort of where I'm going to hang out for this summer town, and it's like the Dunkin' Donuts, or like we would go to this miniature golf thing that we would save up for all year. It's like, oh, another thing, like when the dad gives Rad a $20 bill, and it's like the most amazing thing ever. Like that would make us last the whole summer, you know, $20. Yeah. And we would go to this miniature golf course, and we would spend, again, in your movie where you have the character, the uncle that says like, why are you inside? You know, like this is the beach. But we would just go to this, instead of go to the beach, we'd go to this miniature golf course, and we would just play miniature golf, because if you got the last hole and it was a hole in one, you got to play again. So our goal all summer was just to continually play that one hole and we only spent like $1 that first day to play. And then we just got that hole in one, and you get a card like at the closing up. We would spend like 18 hours a day there at this stupid place, but it was so awesome, you know? So I wanted
to put that in. That was one of people ask, like, what are the things that didn't get in? But definitely the 18th hole putt-putt was, that was part of my childhood. That was winning the Willy Wonka golden ticket if you could get it in the hole.
Totally, yeah. So
I think it's funny though when you mentioned it's a barometer, because obviously everything we make, it's like, you know, if you make a movie that everyone likes, you're doing something wrong. But with Ping Pong Summer, it's like people will just be like, this isn't even a movie. The people who just really do not connect with it. And I think it's a really great barometer is when this kid is pulling into town and all he's looking at are like kind of crappy hotel signs versus all you can eat seafood signs. Yeah. And I think there's a viewer who would be like, what is this kid like damaged? Like, why is he so excited? Whereas I think a lot of us, that reflects our upbringing, and that was a big deal. And I was trying to, you know, honor that and make it 100% sincere and not ironic. But I think there are viewers who are just like, what is he looking at? He's looking at nothing.
Yeah, I totally get it. Like across from my grandma's house was a Shell station. It would just go ding, 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 ding all night long. And that's a sound I couldn't wait to hear, you know, but it's just something about summer. It was so cool. So I totally get it. And I could see, it might be confusing to some people, but I just thought it was just so charming. And what about your casting? Like those kids, I look at them, and I'm obviously involved in the kids business a lot. And I'm like, oh yeah, those kids should be huge stars. I mean, they're so adorable. Are some of them locals? Like how did you do that?
Yeah, it was all, that was a choice. One of our producers, Michael Gottwald, had done Beasts of the Southern Wild, where they found Quvenzhané Wallis, who went on to a humble little Oscar nomination for her at like 6 years old. But I adopted that approach. I really liked those guys working sort of communally. And I thought what would make our movie different is if we didn't ship kids in from New York and LA, and there was a hint of a Maryland accent, which you cannot teach or train. It's just such a weird accent. So I made a really firm commitment that I wanted, and luckily when you're dealing with the adolescent age, I don't think, there's like Chloe Moretz, and there are certain actors that I guess would really bump your movie up. But in the sense of cast dependent, I don't think it played as much of a role as the adults. So we were really lucky in that realm, and people supported it. So we went around the state for about 6 months before shooting and just put a call out on Facebook, got a library room, said you don't have to read lines, you don't have to be an actor. We just want to see as many kids as possible. Wow. And but then for the bad guys, we actually went to Pat Moran, who was John Waters' casting agent in Baltimore. We were having trouble finding the bad guys. And then, I mean, you know, when you're trying to make a movie that feels authentic to the 80s, and then Andy Riddle, who plays Dale, the sidekick, and that kid he was so
awesome. Just those guys were awesome.
But yeah, so it was just trusting these kids, and a lot of them had never acted, and we shot on Super 16, so it was shooting on film.
Nice.
And we were just lucky to find kids. You know, for Rad, there's a direction you could have gone with that character that was maybe more Napoleon Dynamite, where he was kind of wacky and wild. And I just really wanted to underplay that. And I felt like Marcello Conti just had this expressive thing where he didn't really have to act, and you were feeling sympathy for him.
Yeah, he reminded me of Bobby Brady, but in a really charming way. He is so funny because, again, I expected some sort of cynical stuff to come out. He's just a guy who just wanted to try to rap and play ping pong. And it was just so cool the way he just didn't spin out or lose his mind. And I loved when he finally like walked up to Susan Sarandon and said, I should have kissed her, but I didn't. It's just like the first time he really talked to her, and it was so cute. And I love that Susan Sarandon took a shot there, and she was so beautiful in that movie too. You know, I just thought that was such a cool kind of like Mr. Miyagi character to have living next door that was just kind of so unique. That just good job on that, man. It was really cool.
Well, thank you. I feel like, again, the things we make are not for everyone,
Yeah.
and it's as someone who played a vital role in my cinema upbringing, it's like really, really exciting to hear that. Because then you start reading, your movie comes out on DVD, Blu-ray, and unavoidably you read some reviews, and people are like, really missed an opportunity, or like, where
Oh
are
yeah.
the dressing colors? And it's like, you have a handle on things, and it's all subjective, but. It came at a good time to hear you watch this and respond to it well.
Yeah, it was super cool. How would it be like to watch it with your cast? Like that, I bet they were stunned how cool it came out.
Yeah, we did the summer before the movie was done in June actually. We got it done and then didn't premiere until January at Sundance. So we had a private screening to show the families and the kids in June. So they had 6 months to sort of like come to terms with it. And I think everyone at first was kind of like, what is this? They were happy, but it was just a shock to the system because most of them hadn't seen themselves on screen and the parents hadn't seen their kids. But then by the time Sundance came around, I didn't sit through it at the premiere because I felt like I didn't want to give a apologetic, self-deprecating Q&A. And everyone had a blast. It seemed like the premiere itself could not have gone better. So
how great.
It was wonderful. And Leah Thompson, even, I think she was kind of, she came out of that thing like, wow, everything you said you were going to do, or the weird tone of having a sort of underplayed naturalism with a kooky 80s movie, it seemed like it really connected with her to sit with a crowd and watch it.
And she's just like such a great 80s star too. It's just that was so nice to see her. She looked great. It was really,
she's awesome, man. And
she was adorable.
Like, she's still a great actress. And I think the thing is, like, we didn't want to do stunt casting. And what's good about her is it isn't that, because at first it just gives a credibility. And then she kept saying, like, I'm not really saying anything or I'm not doing anything. But it was like one flick of her eyeball and you can laughing. Like, I don't know, not many actors have that.
Yep. No, she's magical. She really is cool. It was great. And it was so nice. And then how did Susan Sarandon fall into this?
She was the first cog because she, you know about her in ping pong. She's sort of a ping pong propagandist. Do you know any of this?
No.
She's a co-owner of a ping pong franchise called Spin, which is a club that started in New York City, and then they branched out. So now they have one in Toronto, LA.
You got such a great idea. I never even thought of that, but that's awesome. I didn't know she was doing that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and it's not that she's great at ping pong. I think she just thinks it's a really good activity that anyone can play. And I think she's embraced becoming a spokesperson for it. So for years, there was a point at which the mentor, it's always a guy, the like alcoholic, slightly shaven. So I lived long enough with it that I thought, let's make this interesting and try to make it a female. And it's not like pervy, like, are she and Rad gonna hook up or anything, right. Just make it sort of sweet. And but for years I actually wanted Werner Herzog to be the like bleakest mentor in sports movie history. Like everything out of his mouth was like, why are you bothering? You're going to die anyway. Don't even pick up. But then we lived with it long enough and thought, let's give a talented actress a role, which typically it would have gone to a male. And Susan, to her credit, she watched Septia in the previous movie, which again is not for everyone, and she seemed to connect with it, thought it was cool. And the real connection was Jay Duplass. I don't know if you know Mark at Jay Duplass's work. They directed her in Jeff Who Lives at Home from a few years ago. And Jay recommended her, where I'm at the point where we're working with kids who hadn't acted before, and I just did not want to have, no matter what, I just don't like negative sets and sort of high energy and all that. And I wanted to make sure that we were casting adult actors who were, you know, professional and cool and sweet, and Jay vouched for her. And then on our behalf, he reached out to her, and that was really what started it all.
It's funny because when I was watching the opening titles, I'm like, wait, this is Leah Thompson and Susan Sarandon. I'm like, I didn't know there was big names in this, you know. And then suddenly I'm like, those are some pretty darn big names. So that was really cool. It gave it such legitimacy. And then but like I said, then I expected cynicism. But then I saw your opening animated sequence. Who did that?
That was a guy named Teddy Blanks and a few other fellas. They're Chips NY is their company, and Teddy he's a musician, and he does poster designing and a lot of stuff. And I reached out to Teddy. I've known him for a while. He's a young buck in New York. And I just said, like, what about not jacking the Wild style opening credits, but something similar? And he was the one that really came up with the idea of, you know, we'll do the department heads as the slushy machines, and then the producers and director as the record players. So again, it's all about, I think, hiring people who are way more creative and smart than you, and hopefully having a good kernel of an idea and then letting them run with it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like taking credit for other people's work. That's I try to hire really smart people.
But you you're an animator too, right? So you
But
so I wonder your take on that, to see, like, I think he did a lot of hand drawing, you know, it was probably a mix of computer, but he was doing a lot of painstaking stuff. And his funny thing to me was, he's like, I'm not a great animator. This might look a little amateur, but he's like, I kind of think that's what it should be. And we were both like, that's what it should be. It should feel scrappy and honest.
Yeah, I did like the opening for Better Off Dead on my dining room table, and there's like, when I filmed it, I forgot to put in like some in between. So there's these parts in the opening titles, for God's sake, that jump, and I'm like, oh crap, that was that cell I forgot. I like went to film my stuff, and I had one cell stuck to my butt, like that I was drying on a chair, and then but now every time I see the movie, I'm like, that's the one. Oh God, that's the frame that was on my butt. I'm so sorry, guys. I've got to take off, but I just wanted to tell you, Mike, I really wish you well, because I think you're a star, and it was a really charming, sweet movie that just made my summer. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I actually wish the podcast hadn't been you just saying really nice things to me. So hopefully maybe we'll do it again and we'll talk about like writing and all those other things. But I really appreciate this. This is good for my ego, and hopefully people will enjoy listening. But I really appreciate it, and look forward to you still trucking.
Oh God, I can't die. I've got 4 kids, so I've got to keep making this stuff.
I appreciate it very, very much. It's talking to a hero. So this is really exciting for me.
You're the best. Okay, thank you, buddy. Have a great rest of your summer. It was great talking.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
This is Nick Dawson from Talkhouse Film, and you've been listening to Savage Steve Holland in conversation with Michael Tully on the Talkhouse Film podcast. For more filmmakers talking film and TV, visit thetalkhouse.com/film. Subscribe to Talkhouse Film and Talkhouse Music Podcasts on iTunes, where you can find all our previous episodes. And while you're there, please rate and review if you can.
Oh, that's great news. Okay, good, because I'm not wearing pants. No, I'm just kidding. I am.